Samhain is approaching. All Hallows Eve is close. It's spooky season to many people, and to us, we know that the veil is thinning, and it's time for the spirits to come forth. The spirits of our ancestors, of the blessed and the damned. Around this time, we often tell a story about a man named Ichabod Crane in the town of Sleepy Hollow that every night was tormented by a Hessian who lost his head in the war, who would roam around taking the heads of others because he did not have his own. In the time that we're living in, I don't think it's a very bad analogy for us to think about that Hessian riding through the night. That rider, the force of empire at his back, seeking to take the heads off of anyone who dares to stand out of order, to not be in their proper place. That hand of empire trying to tear us down. And so, as the spirits of our ancestors come to speak to us in this all-hallowed time, let's remember that it's time to fight that empire and make real everything that they stood for today as we walk together down Creation's paths. Hello, everyone. My name is Charlie, and I am a Christopagan Druid and Priest of Bridget.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brian. I'm a Christopagan Druid and sous chef to the Dogda.
And today we're going to be talking about Samhain, listening to the voice of our ancestors of blood, land, and milk, and remembering to preserve all that they fought for and to defend against all of the evils that they against. But before we get into that, if you haven't already, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, whatever the terminology happens to be on whatever app you're listening to us on. We are putting a lot of work into these, and we've got a lot of great things coming up, especially in the next season that we'll be talking about a little bit later in the episode. You don't want to miss a thing. All right, let's just get into it, shall we?
Happy Samhain, everybody!
It's Samhain-tide, and this has always been one of my favorite times of the year for a lot of reasons. That I have always been sensitive to the spirits of the ancestors since I was a child. And I started noticing relatively young that at least twice a year, they seem to visit more and more often. As this year is approaching, I almost feel like there's a deafening roar from the ancestors just breaking out across the land, though that could just be the bellows of Bridget's four animals who cry out anytime they see injustice. Or maybe they're all singing in unison right now. It's a wacky time to be alive, and there's a lot going on.
I too share similar experiences with this time of year. Actually, both times of year as the veil thins, the interactions with the ancestors, especially this year, a lot more. It's in a way you can almost hear it's like your grandpa yelling at you. You're like, what the heck is wrong with you, boy? I fought against tyranny. You can have a better life, and you're going to throw it all away and let that tyranny win. It's been very interesting. We enter the time in the Northern Hemisphere where we're now moving into the beginning of winter, and our minds already move in this direction. Definitely stronger vibe this year. The number of stray thoughts that were not from within, they were just kind of picked up exteriorly regarding the fight against the rise of fascism and stuff. World War II in particular, and the fight against the rise of fascism, and how we both, Charlie and I both had conversations about how, yes, we won World War II, we stopped Hitler, but the fight against fascism continued and continues. And we live in an age where we see a lot of the signs that the battle may have been won, but the overall war is being lost right now.
I don't want to say it's being lost. I think it's
not going well.
I don't know that I would even say that. So I always had a very close relationship with my great-grandfather. And when he passed beyond, I've maintained that relationship with him, whether I wanted to or not. One of the things that I found remarkable about him when I was doing my family research is that he was in his 50s during World War II. And yet he signed up for the draft 7 times. He wanted to go over there and deal with what was going on in Europe so bad that this 50-year-old man, the draft 7 times. And I still feel that fight in me today. When I say I don't think that the proper way to see this is we're losing, I look at the No Kings rally. The first one and the second one are signs of popular strength. Remember, the adage is true. What it takes for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. And to see that people are rising up, they are speaking up. We are doing what is necessary, especially in Portland, where we are making them look silly. We're making them look ridiculous. And that is a huge moral and morale victory. The biggest thing that we have to worry about right now in this era that we're currently living in is allowing people who want to be seen as scary and powerful to be perceived as scary and powerful. The great blessing that we have as people is they are probably what it would look like if the Three Stooges had tried to make the little dictator. It actually reminds me a lot of that Charlie Chaplin film, what we're currently living through right now, much more than it does a World War II epic or any other film set in the rise of an authoritarian state. It is laughably ridiculous what they are doing. And it's important for us to keep that spirit alive. Yes, it is scary. Yes, it is terrifying. And especially if you are in one of the communities that is currently being targeted, everything that they're doing is designed to instill fear. And as we're entering into this spooky season, it's important to remember that our ancestors have been through this before and have come out on the other side, whether it's Jim Crow in the South, actual slavery in the South, the laws that were passed to exclude Asians from immigrating, or the many laws that we've had in our history to prevent Mexican immigration. We have had this ebb and flow of racism back and forth throughout our history. And one of the things that is so centrally important for Samhain and the message that we need to be carrying out is, number one, there is no such thing as white people. There is no such thing as white people. I need to say that 1,000 times. There is no such thing as white people. White people is a catch-all term that started developing within the United States as a way to differentiate between the slave owner and the enslaved classes, and goes back to the early rebellions in the colonies where indentured servants and slaves were banding together in uprisings. A classification was put forth, filled, of course, with misogyny, because one of the key things that made someone an enslaved person for life is whether or not their mother was of African descent. But the idea of whiteness is in and of itself racist. While many would look at somebody like me and say that I am white, I am Irish, I am Scottish, I am Dutch, I am English. Those are where my heritages actually descend from. The illusion of whiteness is that there is one unifying culture. My white ancestors, my Dutch ancestors, my Irish ancestors, and my Scottish ancestors all had different and distinct cultures that were pitted in battle against each other and did not come from a common tradition or lineage. This is also a problem with the idea of Western civilization. There is no Western civilization. The idea of Eastern and Western civilization was concocted as a way to divide the empire when the Roman Empire started collapsing, where you had the Eastern Empire and the Western Empire, and the many squabbles and struggles between the two. In fact, what we call the Byzantine Empire, they still called Rome. We gave it a different name so that we could treat it as different. This is why it's important for us to honor our ancestry. At no point in my ancestry did I have anybody who was white. That is not where they are from. My Scottish relatives still had a bit of their Scottish American culture in them. My Irish ancestors did as well. Without even knowing it, so did my Dutch and my English ancestors. They brought that with it, and they carried it down to today. We may want a catch-all because we have mixed and matched in this culture, but the catch-all is actually American if we're going to even have one. The mix that made me is one that happened here on this soil. But it's not some common collected whiteness. It is a common collected Americanness that came from the fact that these disparate cultures and peoples could fall in love, get married, and have children, It's that diversity that made me. And allowing for people to believe that there is such a thing as whiteness is a dishonor to our ancestors and to the diversity from which they came. They want to make diversity a bad word. We can't let that happen.
It's very important. And that brings me around to a very pragmatic point I'd like to make at this point in the conversation. When we talk about ancestor veneration and awareness and stuff, we started with the fun, spooky aspect of it because that's dramatic and exciting and is very much a part of our lives. But the very practical level of that is an awareness of our actual history as best as we can. Charlie and I both have taken the time to actually look into, as part of our ancestor awareness, the actual practical, like descendant of this person who was descendant of that person who was descendant of that person going back, so we can better understand exactly what cultures we come from. And beyond that, culturally speaking, understanding which cultures are influenced by which cultures, being aware of our history is so important. And it is an easier, more practical thing that can be done, which is why there's so much effort currently to erase and recreate parts of our history so that everyone can forget. And then in forgetting, it's that phrase, those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. And I would say a truism in a phrase, just because it seems to be so true. When I think about the voices of the ancestors I hear crying out, I feel it so strongly when they're talking about tariffs, for instance. We're kind of at the end of those who may have been alive last time this country, the United States, tried tariffs, and how horrible it went and the damage it caused in setting up additional major failures later on.
And it's important to remember that when we're talking about honoring our ancestors, it's about being honest about our history. Everyone in my family that I've been able to track down fought on the side of the Union in the Civil War if they were here in the United States. I was honestly surprised about that, but it was a pleasant surprise to find out. But I can feel this shudder in my bones and my blood every time there is an hint of giving any kind of recognition to those who fought on the other side of that. We don't honor the South. We don't honor the Confederacy in this country because they were fighting to enslave people. And you might not understand that because the way we teach our history is written by those who are powerful and have their own entrenched interests in this. Our country, our people have always fought against tyranny. It's the one thing that motivates us, and it's the one thing that unifies us. Even today, as we see this authoritarian takeover happening, the actual propaganda on the other side is that they are trying to free people from tyranny, because it is freedom that we love as a people. Going all the way back to our founding in the revolution, people didn't care about the tariffs. That wasn't what motivated people. It was the fact that they had no say in their government. They had no say in how laws were made over themselves, and they were being controlled by an autocratic king all the way across the ocean who kept sending governors over here to tell us what to do. And so we rose up against him. The Civil War was going badly for the Union until they realized it has to be about freedom. And the cause of the Northern fight became about freeing the slaves. People signed up and fought with such vigor that we won. In the South, people were told that they were fighting for their own freedom from Northern aggression, but their own documents, their founding documents, make it very clear that every state that seceded for the right to own and enslave other human beings. The powerful lied to their population and told them that they were fighting for freedom and liberty, and the lie persists. We fought in World War I for the freedom of all people, the war to end all wars. We fought in World War II for freedom, for liberty. We fought the Cold War because we were told about how awful and evil our enemies were, and people volunteered to go to Korea and Vietnam and all of the selective services that fought that covert war over the decades. We did it again with Operation Iraqi Freedom, and we did it in the first Gulf War as well. The thing that motivates us is this idea that we are fighting for freedom. This is what our ancestors have bequeathed to us. I love that word. We don't get to use it enough. This love of freedom, this love of liberty. And it's important to remember that if we are not all free, none of us are free. And that is the ancestral gift that we have. That is our inheritance that we have, that as we are approaching this, we need to be remembering and bringing into our rites and into our rituals, into our practice. During World War II, a coven of witches gathered together every night to curse the German planes that were coming over in the Blitz. Every night they gathered together and they did their rituals to curse the planes so that their bombs would miss and their planes would be shot down. People gathered in churches throughout England and prayed for victory. I am not naive enough to believe that simple words, actions, and rituals like that turn the tide in the war, but they steal our courage and give us strength. By the way, I said steal. This is a phrase we don't use that much anymore, literally putting steel into us to make us stronger and more resilient, like we do with the building when we put the rebar in the concrete. And that is what we need to be doing in our covens, in our groves, in our seed groups, in our churches, in our private family prayers, and in our personal prayers. We need to be invoking the strength of our ancestors who fought so hard for liberty and freedom over the centuries. We need to bring that strength into ourselves. Even if we have ancestors who fought on the wrong side of these conflicts for ownership, personal power, or greed, that is a part of our ancestry that we can cut ourselves off from, deny, and accept the heritage of the land that our ancestors stole from the indigenous people who lived here, who fought for their freedom. That freedom is baked into the soil in our feet. It is the freedom that makes us who we are. And that really needs to be the focus of our Samhain this year, as we are invoking our ancestors, as we're inviting them in to ask for their strength, their guidance, and their wisdom to continue to fight in the diversity of voices that make us who we are, to be strong in the face of these things.
Along with that, as we're entering into the winter season, we should also be mindful, like this is the time to plan. What crops do we want to plant? What do we want to harvest next year? Because this year's harvest sucked. This is the point in the year where we have to be honest about what we've harvested. A lot of it has sucked badly.
To use the biblical language, in 2024, we sowed into the wind, and in 2025, we reaped the whirlwind.
We reaped the whirlwind, yeah. To be biblical about it. And the nice thing about the cycle of life is that's now in our past. We need to learn from it, but we need to let it go, let it be in our past. We don't need to enter into this dark season and dwell and wallow in darkness and suffering, gnashing of teeth. You know, that sounds like hell. So let's not engage in hell activity, but let's plan. What do we want to sow next year? What do we want to start planning towards? So when spring comes around, we're ready. And it'll be time to have good stuff grow.
And remember, the Morrigan is the goddess of judgment and prophecy. Judgment needs to come.
Yeah.
And hopefully in people's minds, in people's actions, in the courts, in the elections, every way that we can, as peaceably as we can, we need to bring that judgment down. And this is the time where we are gathered in the shadow of the Morrigan to focus ourselves, to ask for the oracles, to look for the signs, to call on her protection as the goddess of sovereignty. Because what authoritarians want to take away is the personal sovereignty and agency of all the people. This is one thing I can say about us as a people. That's not something we are ready to do for ourselves. Now, I can hear some of the detractors already saying, but we've done that so much to other people. Yes, that is a great failing of our society and of our culture. And it's one that we need to not repeat.
That is also the power in this practice, is when you're looking at your own ancestors, be honest. You need to accept that it happened, but that it does not determine what your future choices will be. So if you had ancestors that murdered, enslaved people, that did terrible things, part of this practice helps because in being honest, and that was what they did. What they did doesn't influence what you will do. And so you can learn from that and choose better.
This is why we talk about Tikkun Olam. about the reparation of the world. Were our ancestors perfect? Oh, no, 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 no. I knew my grandparents, and I know one of my grandfathers did a lot of harm in his life. And one of my great grandfathers did tremendous harm in his life. It is up to us to do what we can within our power to repair those wounds. That doesn't mean we can make everything like it was. Remember, a repair does not always restore something to a pristine condition. Sometimes we repair things and have to make that crack beautiful, like they do in Japan, and fix the pottery with gold. But we can make it better. We can do that work of reparation. We can do that work of healing.
This also becomes a nice defense because tyranny loves to use these paper tigers and strawman excuses. And they like to go, well, your ancestors did this, therefore I'm allowed to do it, which is like the lamest excuse ever. It reminds me when I was a child and the parents would go, just because Timmy jumps off a cliff, does it mean that you're allowed to jump off a cliff too? No. And it doesn't free me up from the responsibility and the consequences of plummeting off a cliff.
One of the great lessons that we have to learn, if we are going to learn from our history or study our history at all, is that history is not there to lend justification for anything. History is there to provide lessons. We look at our history and see what we did right and what we did wrong. Thomas Jefferson wrote that all men were created equal. And in his mind, he meant men, not men and women. He did not mean that for all humans. He owned humans. But the words of wisdom are there. And we take that good bit that all men were created, and we start to say all people are created equal. All humans are created equal. And we expand and we grow. We plant from that good seed. But you see, we're not justifying our history because this one guy said it in the past. It doesn't really matter what one guy said in the past. What matters is what we are doing now and how we are making it better for everyone. And that really is the gift of Samhain. Our past gave us seeds, and we have to learn and be careful what seeds we plant and which ones we cast into the fire. That is the practice for us. What are we going to keep to plant for the spring? Because there will be a spring. And what are we going to cast into the fire so that it will not grow again? And for some of us, that's going to be harder work than others. And what we need to do as a people is have grace for people that are coming out of tyranny, for people who are coming out of the cult. That doesn't mean that we treat them with kid gloves. If they still say wrong things, we need to be there to correct them. But now is not the time to go after people that are waking up from their long slumber and seeing that they were on the wrong side. We have to have the grace to stand with anyone who wants to fight with us against this authoritarian takeover. Our ancestors would never have gotten where we are, where we were, and where we can be if they always insisted on unanimity. Nothing is univocal, not even the Bible. We'll always have a myriad of voices, but we have to come together on the things that we can agree on. And as long as we can agree that freedom, liberty, and free association are the backbones of our society, then we stand with all those who've come before us, from those who fought in World War II to the labor organizers who stood up to the tyranny of corporations in the time past, to the progressives who fought and busted the trusts and took down the robber barons, to those who fought against kings and empires so that we could have freedom. We have to stand with each and every one of them, shoulder to shoulder. And while we may disagree on some things, that universal cry for freedom needs to ring through us. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope that it's meant something to you. I hope that it's inspired you maybe for something to do for your Samhain ritual. I know I'm going to be telling stories this Samhain about my great uncle, my grandmother's brother, who fought in World War II. He was a fighter pilot in both Europe and the Pacific, and told me so many stories about the war. When we remembering him and the great love and compassion that he taught me, and the ability to be there for people when they need you, who are you going to be remembering? I'd love to know in the comments. If you have a story that you want to share, please leave a comment wherever you're listening to us, especially on Spotify or YouTube. We can see the comments there and we do respond to them. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, please leave us a review. It helps us out more than you could possibly know. So we are going to be taking a brief hiatus, just a couple weeks or so, and then we'll be coming back for the next season of this podcast. Now, in the interim, if you want, we have a little homework for you. If you go over to wisdomscry.com, where you can find a link to it down in the show notes for this episode, we have a book coming out on creation spirituality called, I know this is going to be a shocker for you, CreationsPaths. Yeah. And we are going to be doing episodes about it and a lot of other things starting in the next season. We would love to have your questions. You can go over to wisdomscry.com right now and read the entire book for free, and then contact us either on Blue Sky or via any of the other forums that you can contact us. You can even go into our chat over on Substack at creationspaths.com/chat and let us know what your questions are so that we can answer them when we talk about those chapters in the podcast. Thank you to everybody who was going to do that. I hope you enjoyed the book. I really put a lot of heart and soul into writing it. And there's a practice associated with each and every chapter that will hopefully help you to understand creation spirituality better.
There's even a practice for Samhain.
There is.
Yep.
If you're listening to us on YouTube, Spotify, or CreationsPaths.com, you can leave a comment right there. If you're listening to us anywhere else, even if they say you can leave a comment, they don't notify us, so we won't know. But you can leave a comment there anyway, because engagement is magic. And then head over to CreationsPaths.com, click on chat, and you can leave a message there, and we will see it, and we will be able to get back to you. While you're there, if you happen to have a few dollars, you can pass our way. We offer monthly and annual memberships. You can also support us on Patreon and Ko-fi. I am CE Dorset on both, and you can support us using the Cash App hashtag CreationsPaths. Thank you to everybody who does that. We are ever so grateful. Thank you so much. You all really do help us keep the lights on, keep a roof over our head, and food on our table. If we've ever said anything that's helped you out, please share it with others. That helps us out more than you know.
And before we go, Blessed Morrigan, great spectral queen, cast your shadow over us and give us the gift of prophecy and sight, so that we may see the actions that we need to take to save our country and our land, and to preserve our sovereignty in the days to come. Give us strength and inspire us so that we may do the work. For the battle ahead is long, but we know in the end we will prevail. Marame.
Amen.